The Vault Crime Scene Management Team, VCSM, arrived with the usual corporate efficiency: unmarked black vans, hazard tape bearing the Vault International shield, and a stack of non-disclosure agreements ready to be signed by dead men. Inside the abandoned electrical substation in Queens, what was left of Dr. Bell's unsanctioned compound V disposal experiment was a slurry of crimson and mangled biological matter, the kind of mess that makes even a seasoned Vault lawyer reach for the industrial-strength vodka. The bodies were mostly test subjects, the failed prototypes of a new, highly unstable compound V batch they were trying to perfect, a controlled explosive soup, codenamed the Blister, who had instead turned into a localized biological singularity. The lead VCSM tech, a man whose soul had been traded for a Vault 401k a decade prior, scanned the scene with a professional, bored apathy, mentally calculating the cost of the biohazard cleanup and the standard 2 weeks of mandatory silence his team would require. That professional apathy shattered when a flash of brilliant, impossible green and violet light tore a hole in the stale air above the generator housing. It wasn't a compound V-created effect. It was an interdimensional sphincter, and whatever passed through it was not going to be covered by the company's current liability policy. First, through the tear, landing with the graceful aplomb of a sack of wet bricks, was a man in a red and black tactical suit, twin katanas strapped to his back. He immediately scrambled up, brushing dust from his shoulders. "Well, that was rude," he announced to the empty, bloody room, adjusting a pouch on his belt. "You know, for a show about superheroes, the travel budget is terrible, and the smell smells like a wet dog rolled in a tub of old kidneys. Who is your set dresser? Seriously, Vault needs to fire this guy. Oh wait, I'm guessing Vault is the bad guy here. Corporate overlords? Psychopathic heroes? Yeah, I've seen the title card. Look, the audience knows why we're here. So let's just get to the part where I stab the corporate shills and the dude with the flaming skull does his whole spirit of justice thing. Okay, narrator?" Before anyone could process the meta-theatrical, blood-stained absurdity, a roar of fire and iron followed, and the second figure arrived. The dimensional tear sealed with a sickening sound like tearing steel. A figure wreathed in roaring demonic flame, his skull, a flickering beacon of hellfire, sat atop a customized chopper that was less vehicle and more rolling sculpture forged from molten sin and vengeance. Unlike the first arrival's chaotic energy, the spirit of vengeance, the Ghost Rider, exuded a terrifying, absolute silence, punctuated only by the low, predatory growl of his engine. He didn't look for enemies, he looked for guilt. And in the heart of a Vault black site cleanup, there was enough guilt to fuel the hell cycle for 1,000 years. Huey Campbell, shivering behind an inch of damp drywall across the alley, pressed his face to the brickwork, his temp V jittery eyes wide. Mother's Milk, MM, a man of deep-seated anxieties and meticulous planning, scribbled furiously into a small, plastic-covered notebook. They'd been staking out the warehouse, hoping to intercept the Blister before Vault could successfully weaponize him, and now their simple snatch and grab was the opening act for a satanic motorcycle club and a man talking to the camera. "Okay, MM, what in the actual fuck is that?" Huey whispered, his voice trembling. MM never looked up. "Not a soup, Huey. Not Vault issue. Too clean." He meant the style of the violence. The compound of Vi carnage was messy, pathetic. The newcomer's flames radiated a terrifying, focused purity. "The corporate boys are freezing up. They don't have a protocol for this. And the loud one..." MM glanced at the figure in red, who was currently kicking a discarded corporate-branded coffee cup. "He's clinically insane, but look at him. He's not attacking the innocents. He's going straight for the Vault guys." The VCSM lead, finally retrieving the remnants of his professionalism, shouted into his earpiece, "We have a two-man intrusion, non-soup but highly aggressive, requesting immediate 7 backup. I repeat, 7 backup." "Oh, you asked for 7 backup, did you?" Deadpool said, his voice mocking. He spun one of his katanas. "You know, that's what we call a worst decision in the biz. Did you think they were going to bring in the deep? Will he talk to the fishmen and tell them to swim away from the fire? This ain't a good corporate environment for you, friend." The VCSM lead, followed by 2 armed guards, unwisely opened fire. The mercenary didn't move, he simply tilted his head. The bullets didn't hit him, but were vaporized mid-air by a sudden, intense burst of heat before they even reached the red suit. The heat emanated from the roaring presence of Ghost Rider, whose skull was now burning with twice its intensity, the sound of the flames like 1,000 screams of the damned. The Vault Guard's eyes widened in naked terror as their weapons melted. Deadpool sighed dramatically. "See, I told you, not good for the environment. Now, for the traditional beatdown, I think I'll go for the knees first. It's funny because it hurts." What followed was not a fight, it was a liquidation. Deadpool moved with the chaotic, impossible grace of a seasoned killer, his movements too fast for the average human eye, his katanas slicing through the Vault security's non-Vault enhanced bodies. It was quick, messy, and executed with a running commentary that referenced the scene's terrible lighting and the predictable nature of disposable henchmen. Meanwhile, the Ghost Rider had cornered the last VCSM tech, and Dr. Bell, the scientist responsible for the blister. The doctor, a sweat-drenched man in a lab coat, babbled out a desperate plea about patents and Vault contracts. The spirit of vengeance dismounted the hell cycle. There were no words, only the flames roaring, the ambient temperature spiking, and the palpable, horrific weight of all the doctor's sins, the lies, the cover-ups, the compound 5 given to poor, desperate mothers, being weighed in an instant. The doctor was not judged by human law or corporate mandate, but by cosmic, unforgiving justice. The man began to scream, not from external pain, but from the realization of his own utter moral bankruptcy. It was a scream of the soul recognizing its own filth, and it was loud enough to drown out the low idol of the hell cycle. "Don't worry, folks, he's just reviewing his life choices," Deadpool shouted from the back, wiping his blade on a discarded Vault banner. "Great for the portfolio, terrible for the human spirit, which, by the way, I still have, mostly. Just don't look at my browser history, dude." Huey gripped his knees, dry heaving. Yanked him backward, out of the alley. "Enough, Huey! We got what we needed!" We saw that thing kill him with his eyes," Huey whispered, horrified. "No, Huey," said, his voice low and professional, masking his own revulsion. "We saw that thing make a man face the totality of his guilt, and the guilt killed him. It's better than Vaught's PR. It's worse than anything Butcher ever cooked up. No collateral, just targeted pure annihilation. We need to go. We need to tell Billy." Back inside the wreckage, Deadpool stood over a shattered, burning computer. Right, so Vault is a pharmaceutical, media, and defense conglomerate that literally sells psychopathy to the public. And the top guy is a flag-wearing psychopath with mommy issues who is functionally immortal, he summarized, pulling a thumb drive from the debris. He winked at the non-existent camera. "Look, I know a lucrative contract when I see one. I'm just going to grab some files and a chimichanga, and we can figure out who gets to stab Homelander first, right? Flaming Mojo?" The Ghost Rider only stared at the mercenary, the flames on his skull flickering, perhaps in confusion, perhaps in recognition of the deep, chaotic moral void that somehow, still, held a kernel of good intent. He remounted the hell cycle, the sound of his engine a promise of future retribution. The duo vanished, not through fire or portal, but with a simple, unnerving finality, leaving behind only the smoldering ruins, the stench of sin, and the faint, unsettling echo of a demonic growl. And Huey didn't stop running until they reached the relative safety of their heavily barricaded, soundproofed safe house, where they both knew the only person who could possibly leverage this kind of absolute chaotic force was the last man Huey ever wanted to give a new weapon to. The air in the boys' basement hideout was thick with the scent of cheap beer, stale cigarette smoke, and the perpetual underlying paranoia of living 1 foot in front of a corporate psychopath's laser eyes. Billy Butcher, already 5 Temp Phi doses into his latest suicidal run, was hunched over a grimy map of Vault Tower when Huey and MM burst in, panting and desperate. The look on Huey's face, a mixture of existential terror and the shock of seeing true evil unmasked, told Butcher everything he needed to know about the night's stakeout. "We got some intel on the Compound V disposal site, Billy, but..." Huey trailed off, unable to articulate the sheer demonic authority they had witnessed. Butcher didn't look up, only taking a drag from his cigarette. "Spit it out, Huey. Don't tell me the Deep got a new flock of dolphins to guard a barrel of the stuff. If it's not laser eyes or a nuke-proof skin, I don't want to hear it." "It's worse than laser eyes, Billy," MM insisted, dropping his notebook onto the map. The pages were filled with meticulous small handwriting, descriptions of the portal, the red and black suit, the meta-commentary, and the undeniable terror of the flaming skull. It was an unsanctioned experiment. Vought tried to cover it up, but 2 hostiles showed up, a mercenary in a suit, unkillable, talking to himself, and a demon on a motorcycle. Butcher finally looked up, his one good eye narrowing with cynical calculation. "Demon? Literal demon, Billy?" Huey managed, pouring himself a glass of water with a shaking hand. "Wreathed in hellfire, made the doctor confess all his sins, and then the guilt killed him. No explosion, no physical damage, just pure internal annihilation. It's called the Penance Stare, according to the Insane One." The mercenary's name, Deadpool, along with the title Ghost Rider, sounded absurd in the grounded grime of their hideout. Butcher, however, saw past the absurd names and right to the core functionality: uncontrollable, non-Vault, anti-soup violence. "Unkillable, you say?" Butcher asked, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Kills a man by forcing him to look at his own moral filth? No collateral damage, no PR cover-up, because Vault doesn't have a protocol for a flaming skull?" "Billy, this is not a weapon," MM warned immediately, folding his arms across his chest. "It's cosmic horror. We don't control that. And the Merc, he's pure chaos. He knew we were watching. He knew we were from another universe. He knew about the audience. He's a wild card, Billy, and wild cards get people killed." "Right. And Homelander, the unhinged, deeply compromised, psychotic, corporate asset, is a stable variable," Butcher countered, standing up. "Look, mate, we're dying from Temp Phi. We're running out of rope. Vought is winning. If the Almighty himself sent 2 psychotic hitmen, one a demon, one a fourth wall-breaking clown, to gut this whole corporate scam, then who the fuck are we to say no?" Butcher threw his cigarette on the floor and crushed it with his boot. "We don't need to control them, MM. We need to point them. We point the demon at the ones who deserve the worst. We point the clown at the corporate structure. Let him piss on the PR. We use them as a diversion while we get to Ryan." He saw his goal, as always, as both the destruction of Homelander and the rescue of his wife's son. These two, this Ghost Rider and this Deadpool, were simply incredibly effective short-term tools. He took the thumb drive Huey had managed to snatch from Deadpool's drop spot and plugged it into their system. It was a chaotic mess of Vault data, corporate contracts, and, surprisingly, a single, perfectly formatted PDF titled Wade Wilson's Guide to Not Being a Psychopathic Soup and Best Chimichanga Recipes. "We find them," Butcher declared, grabbing his coat. "The mercenary said he's looking for a contract. I'll give him the biggest one of his life. All of Vault International. starting with Homelander. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Vought Tower, Ashley Barrett was experiencing a panic attack, so severe she was ripping out entire clumps of her expensive hair extension. She stood in front of a massive Vought News Network screen, staring at the blurry, heavily edited footage of the Queen's incident. The VCSM team's report was a masterpiece of corporate euphemism, claiming unauthorized non-Vought metahumans utilizing unstable compound V variants initiated a catastrophic, localized energy event. The reality, however, was in the raw, secure internal feeds. Ashley saw the Ghost Rider, she saw the penance stare, she saw the agonizing internal death of the scientist, who was not physically harmed, but was somehow spiritually annihilated. No, Ashley mumbled, dropping a hair clump onto the pristine white carpet. We can manage fire. We can manage a blast. We can manage a demon, for Christ's sake. We had a literal Nazi for a year. But this is unmanageable. It's not a soup. It's not Vought. We can't sue it. We can't sign it. We can't market it. What's the brand, Stan? Vought International, serving up super psychos and occasionally hellfire demons. Stan Edgar, still the CEO in this era, watched the footage from his private soundproof office with a detached, clinical interest. He saw Ashley's panic and found it predictable. He wasn't afraid of a demon or an alien or an insane clown. He was afraid of anything he couldn't acquire or destroy. Ashley, Edgar's voice was calm, cutting through her hysteria. Call in Black Noir, send him to find them. Do not engage, observe, and prep a new PR campaign. The narrative is rival super-terrorists attack Vaught's humanitarian research facility. And Homelander, sir? Ashley whispered, already knowing the answer. Edgar smiled, that terrible, non-committal smile of a man who controls gods. Homelander will see two things, a threat to his absolute supremacy and a fun new toy to break. He's easily managed if you just appeal to his ego. Let him think he can take them. In the meantime, I want every lawyer, every scientist, and every mercenary Vought has on the payroll working on how to put that flaming skull in a cage, and I want the mercenary's contract. He's asking for money? Fine. Give him $1 billion. Give him a theme park. Just get him under contract. Because if he's not a product, he's a weapon, and Vought is the only company that sells weapons this good. The two figures, the clown and the demon, were now walking a path directly into a confrontation with Vaught's entire infrastructure, but they weren't walking alone. Butcher, driven by desperation and a dwindling life expectancy from Temp Fave, was already on the hunt, hoping to guide the devil's own justice against the corporate false gods. His plan, like all his plans, was simple, brutal, and utterly insane. Use the chaos of the unkillable duo to kill the unkillable god. The target was the Deep, currently in the middle of a deeply humiliating Vought-mandated PR rehabilitation tour that involved him volunteering at a marine life center in San Diego. The tour was a transparent attempt by Vought to rebrand the disgraced soup following his numerous sexual misconduct scandals. Butcher's goal was simple: expose the fraud, watch the Deep squirm, and, more importantly, put a high-profile, undeniable target in front of the Ghost Rider to gauge the full extent of the penance stare on a Compound 5 subject. They found the duo sitting casually on a rooftop overlooking the Marine Center. The Ghost Rider was a terrifying tableau of stillness, the hellfire on his skull burning low like an ember waiting for a breeze. Deadpool, meanwhile, was constructing an impressive chimichanga tower out of supplies he'd looted from a nearby convenience store. "Took you lot long enough," Deadpool announced without turning around, his voice slightly muffled. "Did you bring the contract? Because my agent, Lando Calrissian, is very clear on my minimum rate per dimensional shift. Also, your leader is Billy Butcher, iconic. Don't worry, writers, I'll only call him Butcher a few times before I get bored." Butcher, ever pragmatic, ignored the fourth wall break. He cut straight to the chase, pulling out a handful of photos of Compound V victims, not the soups, but the civilians injured during a recent, poorly covered deep rescue attempt at a local beach. "We don't need a contract," Butcher said, his voice a low growl. "We need justice. See this?" He pointed at a picture of a little girl with shrapnel wounds. "This pathetic fish-fingered wanker down there, the Deep, he caused this. He's a fraud, a rapist, a corporate toy. He's covered in more moral filth than you can shake a melting stick at. We want you to unleash that. Stare on him. Live on the Vought-controlled public feed. Show the world what their heroes really are." Ghost Rider slowly turned his head. The flames intensified, the spectral eyes focused not on Butcher, but on the picture of the girl. The spirit of vengeance cared nothing for corporate politics or PR, but everything for the guilt of the corrupted and the suffering of the innocent. Deadpool shrugged. "I mean, I'm just here for the stabbing and the paycheck, but the flaming fella is all about the cosmic balance. That fish fucker down there, he's got enough internal monologue to keep the spirit busy for an hour. It's a great warm-up act for the main event." He pointed towards the northeast. "Homelander, Vought Tower, you know the drill." The ambush was cinematic. The Deep, clad in his ridiculous Seven costume, was making a tearful, Vought-scripted apology to a rescued sea otter named Muffins when the Ghost Rider's hell cycle roared to life, leaping over the aquarium fence in a blast of fire and noise. Deadpool, meanwhile, materialized in the observation deck, kicking over a tripod and taking the Vought News network feed hostage. "Hello, Vought fans! Are you tired of false heroes and thinly veiled corporate propaganda? Well, today, we've got a live, uncensored look at what happens when a certified spirit of vengeance looks into the soul of a registered sex offender who talks to his gills." On the ground, the Deep shrieked, scrambling away from the terrifying, fiery apparition. He tried to fight, clumsily using his enhanced strength to throw a concrete planter, but the Ghost Rider merely incinerated the projectile mid-air. The Deep was fast, but the spirit of vengeance was absolute. Cornered against the dolphin tank, his bravado crumbled into pathetic whimpers. Ghost Rider dismounted. The Deep was trapped in the intense heat of the spirit's aura. The flames on the skull roared, drawing the air out of the enclosure. The spirit of vengeance locked eyes with the Deep. The penance stare was not like a simple confession. It was an enforced, total immersion into the lifetime of pain and suffering the subject had inflicted upon others, amplified by cosmic, demonic power. For the Deep, the reality of the stare was an internal tsunami. He saw the face of Starlight, the look of terror during the assault multiplied by every woman he had ever coerced, victimized, or simply used. He saw the genuine, crippling sadness in the eyes of the sea creatures he professed to love, but truly only used for self-pity. He saw the fear in every civilian during his botched rescues. It wasn't a film, it was a sensory, agonizing reality of his own moral sewage. The effect on a Compound V soup was catastrophic. Compound V didn't just give physical powers, it rewrote the brain, enhancing the narcissism, the entitlement, the sociopathy. The stare forced the Deep, a man whose psyche was built on denial and self-pity, to confront the enormity of his crimes which his Vought-enhanced ego could not structurally withstand. The Deep didn't just scream, he imploded. He dropped to his knees, clawing at his own eyes, his mouth wide in a silent, horrific rictus of absolute spiritual despair. Vaught's compound, V-enhanced durability, provided no protection against a soul-level attack. His skin mottled, his eyes bled, and every orifice gushed a dark fluid that was not blood, but seemed to be a physical manifestation of his soul's corruption. He seized up, convulsing violently for 30 seconds, the sound of his spiritual agony echoing even over the chaos. Then he went still, dead. Not from a physical wound, but from the raw, unadulterated shock of recognizing his own utter moral bankruptcy. The deep, the pathetic, corporate-made hero had been annihilated by his own guilt. "Told you he was dirty," Deadpool said into the camera, cheerfully. "That's one less soup to worry about. Now don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more fun vigilante justice." Next up, the guy who killed Robin, I think. "Vought, send me the money." In Vought Tower, Ashley Barrett watched the live feed cut to black. Her trembling had ceased, replaced by a cold, clinical horror. "The stare! It bypasses the compound fee durability," she whispered to a room full of terrified Vought executives. "It doesn't kill the body, it kills the soup. It killed the product. That thing, that spirit of vengeance, it can kill Homelander." The silence in the room was heavier than a neutron bomb. Ashley didn't need Stan Edgar to tell her what to do next. Her corporate survival instinct took over. The two anti-heroes were no longer potential assets or simple liabilities. They were an existential, spiritual threat to Vaught's entire $100 billion brand. Meanwhile, back at the hideout, Butcher's face was a mask of cold satisfaction. "See, Huey, that's what I call a clean kill. Homelander is covered in more guilt than that fish fucker's tank. We found our golden ticket." The reaction from Vought Tower was immediate and volcanic. The sudden public annihilation of a top-tier soup, even one as disgraced as the Deep, sent a shockwave through the corporation, the stock market, and the public's perception of superhuman power. For decades, Vought had successfully marketed Compound Vi as the ultimate safeguard, the biological barrier against all terrestrial threats. The sight of the Deep's spectacular, agonizing self-implosion on live television, a death caused by nothing more than an internal reckoning, obliterated that illusion. Ashley Barrett's PR team went into overdrive, deploying the pre-planned super-terrorist narrative, blaming the unstable, unauthorized metahumans for introducing a metaphysical bioweapon into the ecosystem. The Deep's death was spun as a tragedy, a heroic defense of the Marine Center, and a terrible example of the dangers posed by the unregistered, non-Vought licensed soup community. But the fear was real and it was spreading. Not the fear of a building-toppling soup fight, but the existential dread of being judged by an absolute, non-negotiable moral standard. The Ghost Rider was unmanageable because he didn't care about the NASDAQ, the Sevens contracts, or the public's love. He cared only about vengeance. And Vought was, quite literally, built on sin. The fallout hit Homelander the hardest. Homelander was, above all else, a fragile narcissist who demanded absolute adoration and supremacy. The Ghost Rider's presence introduced a factor he could neither comprehend nor control. He couldn't burn the Rider with his heat vision. The Hell Cycle was literally made of fire. He couldn't kill the mercenary Deadpool, who simply stood up and stitched himself back together after being run over by a speeding Vought vehicle. The Deep's execution had been a terrifying demonstration of Homelander's worst nightmare, a power that saw through his costume, through his marketing, through his invulnerability, and straight into the terrified psychopathic little boy inside. Homelander, hovering over the Vought Tower balcony, watched a manipulated Vought News Network clip of the Deep's death, his perfect face contorted with a primal, possessive rage. "He can't do that," he snarled, slamming his fist into the concrete railing, sending cracks radiating down the side of the skyscraper. The railing was not a threat. The Ghost Rider was. "He can't see inside me. I'm the hero. I'm the one who saves people. I'm the one you love. I don't feel guilty about anything. They love me." His handlers, Ashley, Stan Edgar's stand-in, and his new, terrified therapist, tried to manage the escalating crisis with the usual blend of flattery and sedatives. "Of course, Homelander," Ashley cooed, despite her hands shaking visibly. "That creature, the so-called Ghost Rider, is merely a chaotic anomaly. His stare only works on the weak, the morally compromised. You, sir, are perfection. You are the only true hero. You have no guilt." This was the wrong thing to say. Homelander knew on a deep, pathological level that he was nothing but guilt, the constant, gnawing guilt of not being loved enough, of the truth of his power, of the casual murder and indifference he committed daily. He just repressed it with overwhelming power and the illusion of public love. The penance stare was the ultimate unrepressor. "You're lying!" Homelander screamed, turning his laser eyes on the therapist, melting the man's head in a burst of steam and bone. The therapist's last words were a choked plea for his own life. Ashley didn't even flinch, only managing to whisper, "Security, clean that up, standard protocols." "I am the only god here," Homelander said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, controlled whisper. "That clown and that thing, they are threatening my supremacy. They are threatening my brand. They are a super terrorist threat I need to eliminate, personally, before they embarrass me again. I want everything Vought has on the clown's healing factor, and I want an anti-fire suppressant that can douse hellfire." Homelander's immediate focus became the elimination of the threat, not Vaught's, but his own. He needed to re-establish the narrative that he was the most powerful being on the planet, and the only way to do that was to publicly and brutally murder the unkillable duo. The fact that the Ghost Rider could bypass his durability and potentially kill him with an eye gaze only fueled his murderous need to dominate. The confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. The boys, having successfully used the Deep's demise as leverage, were trying to guide their two chaotic allies toward the next corporate target, a Vought-controlled bank used to launder money from their illegal Compound V overseas sales. Deadpool, ever a magnet for trouble, had already managed to leak a substantial amount of Vaught's internal memos via a live-streamed, fourth wall-breaking hacking session, during which he sang a terrible, original song about Homelander's Oedipus complex. "All right, that's it, mother's milk," Deadpool told the camera, holding a Vought phone. "I just told the world where Stan Edgar keeps his secret stash of offshore bank accounts. Cue the dramatic entrance of the main villain. 5, 4, 3. Before he could reach 1, the air pressure changed. The sound of high-velocity flight was followed by a sonic boom, and Homelander landed, crushing the roof of the bank. He didn't come with a press pool. He came with pure, unbridled malice. "You too," Homelander's voice was low, vibrating with suppressed fury. "You're trespassing on my property, on my brand. You're making me look weak." Deadpool, leaning against the Ghost Rider's hell cycle, waved a hand dismissively. "Oh no, you did that all by yourself, pal. We're just the comedic relief and the inescapable force of cosmic doom. Now I know you're super durable, so maybe we skip the stabby part and go straight to the flaming skull looking deep into your soul part. It's the new hotness." Ghost Rider, without a word, dismounted his cycle. The air around him shimmered with aggressive heat. The spirit of vengeance recognized a monstrous soul, a soul guilty of thousands of sins and murders, all perpetrated while wearing the veneer of a hero. Homelander was not just a villain. He was the apotheosis of hypocrisy and unaccountability. The Ghost Rider saw him for what he was, a god-level sinner. Homelander, unable to contain his narcissistic rage any longer, lifted his hand, the air around his eyes beginning to shimmer red. "I'm going to take you apart piece by bloody piece, you costume freak. And then I'll find your mother and burn her too." That was the line. That was the ultimate transgression against the principle of vengeance. The spirit of vengeance raised his skeletal hand. In an instant, the hellfire surrounding him intensified, turning from orange and yellow to an intense, pulsating white-blue. He was not just ready to fight, he was ready to judge. The fight between Homelander and the Ghost Rider, with Deadpool playing the role of the world's most irritating, unkillable distraction, was not a traditional superhero battle. It was a terrifying spectacle of physical, metaphysical, and comedic violence that ripped apart the financial district of Manhattan. Homelander opened with a full-power blast of his heat vision, aiming to incinerate the Ghost Rider. The beams, capable of slicing skyscrapers and vaporizing human beings, struck the spirit of vengeance directly in the chest. The result was unexpected. The Ghost Rider's flames flared, absorbing the heat and power of Homelander's attack. The spirit of vengeance didn't flinch. In fact, he took a step forward, the intense, hellish energy around him seeming to feed on the pure energy of Homelander's laser eyes. Compound V, the pseudoscience that empowered Homelander, had no jurisdiction over genuine demonic energy. The attacks were nullified, even welcomed, by the spirit of vengeance. Homelander, whose greatest weapon was also his greatest fear, the potential to hurt himself, was stunned. He'd never faced an opponent whose very nature defied his physics. Before he could recalibrate, Deadpool, with a war cry that sounded suspiciously like a rejected jingle for a fast food chain, launched himself at the soup's back. "Surprise, you fascist flag waver! Now taste the sweet justice of two perfectly balanced katanas named B and Arthur." The swords, aimed at the back of Homelander's neck, bounced off his invulnerable skin with a metallic clang. Homelander backhanded Deadpool without looking, sending the mercenary flying through a wall of the now exposed bank vault. The impact was enough to pulp a normal human, but a second later, Deadpool's muffled, sarcastic voice emanated from the rubble. "Ouch! Did you see that, folks? Cinematic gold. The sound effects budget for this show is amazing. Don't worry, the healing factor kicks in quick. It's like a corporate credit card for pain." Homelander's fury was now absolute. He charged the Ghost Rider, abandoning his ranged attack for pure physical force. The sound of their collision was a deafening crack that broke windows a mile away. Homelander's enhanced strength was monumental, easily enough to flatten tanks, and he drove a massive fist into the flaming skull. The Ghost Rider took the blow, the force of which shattered the very pavement beneath him, but his skeletal form remained intact. He was an entity of justice, not flesh. He grabbed Homelander's wrist with a hand wreathed in chain and hellfire, and for the first time in his life, Homelander felt a cold, unnerving dread. "I am the spirit of vengeance," the Ghost Rider's voice finally boomed, a deep, resonating sound that echoed in the hearts of every bystander and every corrupt Vought official watching the feed. "You are guilty." Homelander tried to pull his wrist free, but the strength of the spirit was not muscle, it was cosmic law. The flames began to spread from the skeletal hand, creeping up Homelander's arm, not burning his skin but targeting the very essence of the compound V that empowered him. The super roared, not from pain, but from the sudden, terrifying realization that his powers might be vulnerable. Sensing the opportunity, Deadpool reappeared, vaulting over the bank counter with a stolen satchel full of cash. "He's distracted! Go for the stairs, Sparky! Make him watch that time he ate a whole tub of ice cream and pretended to share it with Starlight. That was a crime, Homelander." The interruption, however, gave Homelander the chance he needed. He tore his wrist free with a final, massive exertion, a deep, guttural bellow of pure ego overriding the fear. He flew straight up, leaving a vertical sonic column in his wake before plummeting down again, aiming a powerful, controlled heat vision blast directly at the Hell Cycle. The cycle, the Ghost Rider's conduit and anchor, was briefly engulfed in the powerful energy, the metal screaming under the heat. Homelander wasn't trying to kill the spirit, he was trying to neutralize the threat. He knew instinctively that if the Ghost Rider's focus was on him, the stare would be unleashed. He needed to create an advantage. Butcher, watching the chaos unfold on a massive monitor in the hideout, hammered his fist on the table. "He's running! The bastard's running! He's never run before!" "He's not running, Billy," corrected, his eyes wide. "He's repositioning. He knows he can't kill them with his hands, so he's changing the game. He's going to hit them where they can't fight back, the public narrative." MM's prediction came true moments later. Homelander reappeared, not over the ruined bank, but hovering high above Times Square, surrounded by cheering fans who hadn't seen the fight, only the reports of super-terrorists. "Attention, American citizens!" Homelander's amplified voice boomed, carrying across the entire city. Those two creatures, the fire demon and the pathetic clown, they are super-terrorists. They murdered the Deep. They are trying to destabilize your security. They are a non-Vought, unauthorized threat to your safety, and I will stop them. Back at the bank, the Ghost Rider was slowly, methodically, pulling the charred remains of his hell cycle from the wreckage, the fire around him burning with a cold, contained fury. Deadpool, having emptied the satchel of cash and left behind a single, handwritten note demanding more money, was now examining the damage. "Well, that escalated quickly," Deadpool mused, tapping the side of his mask. "He didn't stick around for the big finish. That's a classic Homelander move. He's got a show to run. Ghost Rider, my flaming pal, you're the one who can actually kill him, but he just turned us into the newest villains on Vought News. We're now public enemy number one. This is where the story gets dark, you know? Corporate evil, celebrity worship, the whole shebang." Butcher, having relocated to a secondary surveillance post, contacted the duo via a scrambled Vought channel Deadpool had immediately exploited. "Oi, you two, listen up!" Butcher's voice was desperate. "He's turning the public against you. Vought is going to bury you in PR. We need a better target. Someone deep inside the machine. Forget the bank. Forget the streets. We're going to Vought Tower. We're going after the biggest hypocrite of the lot." The Ghost Rider looked at the ruined city, the rising flames of panic in the distance, and the knowledge of the deep, institutionalized guilt radiating from Vought International's headquarters. The spirit of vengeance needed no convincing. The real sin was not a crime in the street. It was a crime of the soul, protected by a massive corporate entity. Deadpool, ever the cynic, merely grinned beneath his mask. "Vought Tower? Oh, I hope they have a snack bar. This is going to be legendary. Just need to grab some more bullets and maybe a funny hat." Butcher's plan was a cynical masterpiece. Use the Ghost Rider's raw, absolute vengeance against a target that had been deemed untouchable by every legal, financial, and superhuman resource Vought possessed. The target? Stan Edgar, the non-powered CEO who embodied the cold, calculating evil of Vought International. Edgar's hands were clean, legally and corporately, but his soul was stained with the blood of every Compound V victim, every moral compromise, and every act of corporate warfare. The team gathered in a forgotten subway tunnel beneath Midtown. Butcher laid out the plan. Huey would use his Temp-Fi teleportation to breach Vought Tower's secure server room, install a logic bomb to briefly disable the highest-level surveillance and security systems, and Frenchie would provide a custom-built sonic device capable of briefly scattering the fire of the Hell Cycle if the Ghost Rider became too indiscriminate in his rage. "Edgar," Butcher stressed, pointing to a photo of the impassive CEO, "is the system, not the asset. He's the one who gave the order, who covered up the first crime, who signed off on the exploitation. Homelander is just a rabid dog on a leash. Edgar is the bastard holding the leash. He's the one who deserves the stare most." The Ghost Rider merely stood, a silent monolith of judgment. He understood the hierarchy of sin. Edgar's guilt was quiet, bureaucratic, and massive, the very foundation of Vault's corruption. Deadpool, however, raised an immediate objection, not on moral grounds, but on aesthetic ones. Wait, hold the phone. You want the flaming skull guy to murder the suit in the corner office? That's not a very cinematic climax. Where's the big fight? Where's the exploding building? The audience is going to be bored. You need the main event, the big boss fight, Homelander. We don't get Homelander until we take out his security blanket, Butcher growled. You break the CEO, the company goes into freefall. The dog goes off leash and starts eating the owners. That's when we kill the dog. Simple. No, it's not simple, it's boring, Deadpool insisted. You're a great writer for grimdark satire, Garth Ennis, but you're a terrible writer for an action blockbuster. Fine, I'll go along with your dreary plan, but I'm telling you, this is a terrible way to end the first act. Also, this plan involves Huey teleporting naked, which frankly is a visual crime against humanity. The infiltration was textbook chaotic brilliance. Huey, fueled by adrenaline and Temp V, made a series of terrifying, naked jumps into the Vault server room. While he scrambled to install the device, the security grid flickered offline for 3 critical minutes. That was all the Ghost Rider needed. The spirit of vengeance didn't take the elevator. He drove the hell cycle straight up the sheer side of Vault Tower, the wheels of fire gripping the glass and steel, leaving a scorched trail visible from the streets below. Meanwhile, Deadpool took the high-speed elevator, making sure to hit every emergency stop button and serenade the terrified Vault employees inside with a medley of show tunes, thereby drawing the attention of every available armed security detail and allowing Ghost Rider a clear path. Stan Edgar's office, high above the chaos, was silent and imposing. Edgar was on a secure video call, calmly discussing the quarterly returns on a new Compound V variant. He didn't flinch when the temperature in the room plummeted and the faint roar of a demonic engine grew closer. The Ghost Rider burst through the massive floor-to-ceiling panoramic window, shattering the glass in a spray of razor-sharp shards. Edgar's security detail opened fire instantly, but their high-powered automatic weapons merely melted against the spirit's impenetrable hellfire aura. Edgar finally ended his call, calmly placing his phone on the desk. He didn't panic. He just studied the spirit of vengeance with the detached interest of a CEO sizing up a hostile takeover. "I must say," Edgar said, his voice measured, devoid of fear, "you are impressive. The Deep's file did not do you justice. A truly metaphysical weapon. Vault's science division would pay you any sum you desire, tax-free, for a full analysis of your powers. You are a resource, Mr. Rider." The Ghost Rider dismounted the cycle, the fire on his skull pulsing. The air in the room was now oppressive with heat and the weight of vengeance. Edgar, a non-powered human, stood his ground. "You deal in guilt, I am told. You look into souls. Do you truly believe that I, Stan Edgar, am a villain? I am a CEO. I provide employment. I provide security. I provide the only thing that matters in this world, soups. I am necessary. What you call guilt, I call acceptable operational metrics." The spirit of vengeance took a single, slow step forward. He raised his hand, the flames pulsed with the promise of the penance stare. But before the ultimate judgment could be unleashed, a new factor intervened. Black Noir, Vault's silent, brutal enforcer, dropped from an air vent above the spirit of vengeance. Noir was an unstoppable force, a compound V soup with strength, durability, and a focus that made him terrifyingly effective. He was armed with a custom-made military-grade chain that had been specially coated with a fire-retardant Compound V variant developed in the Science Division, specifically as an anti-Ghost Rider contingency. The battle was silent, brutal efficiency versus pure, raging vengeance. Noir swung the chain, not aiming for the skull, but to ensnare the spirit's limb. The chain wrapped around the Ghost Rider's arm, and for a moment, the hellfire seemed to dim as it made contact with the V-coated metal. This gave Edgar the critical opening he needed. He pressed a hidden button on his desk. "An unfortunate mistake, Mr. Ryder," Edgar said, finally showing a sliver of cold satisfaction. "But Vought always develops the countermeasure. Before the threat. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a very urgent meeting with the White House." A small, high-frequency sonic burst erupted from the ceiling. Frenchie's device, but not controlled by him. It was a jamming signal, overriding Huey's logic bomb and fully engaging the building's maximum security lockdown. The burst was immediately followed by a barrage of Vought security guards, not with guns, but with high-powered industrial fire hoses spraying a thick, chemical retardant meant to douse hellfire. The Ghost Rider was temporarily distracted by the attack, his focus shifting to the physical threat of Noir. Edgar, ever the cold manipulator, had used the distraction to escape through a secure panic room that opened into his private office, sealing himself away just as Black Noir delivered a massive, powerful punch that sent the spirit of vengeance flying back toward the shattered window. The plan had failed. The CEO was safe, and the spirit of vengeance was trapped, forced to fight a physical battle against a seemingly unkillable soup on a battlefield engineered for his containment. The battle in Stan Edgar's office quickly devolved from a metaphysical judgment to a brutal, high-stakes physical confrontation. Black Noir, devoid of fear and focused solely on his programming to neutralize the threat, was relentless. He used the Vought-engineered fire retardant chain to great effect, attempting to bind the Ghost Rider, whose hellfire was noticeably dampened by the compound V-infused coating. The spirit of vengeance, forced to fight a physical battle, retaliated with his own hellfire chain, the searing demonic metal whipping out and wrapping around Noir's neck. The effect was horrifying. Noir's invincible compound vice skin was not proof against hellfire. The demonic metal burned the soup not with physical heat, but with spiritual pain. Noir let out a silent, gasping sound of agony, a sound that only the completely unfeeling can make, and tore the chain from his neck, his black suit scorched. While the spirit of vengeance was locked in a brutal, silent dance of death with Noir, Deadpool re-entered the scene with a flare only he could manage, dropping down from a maintenance hatch above the office floor. He landed in a crouch, pulling out 2 pistols. "Did you miss me? I brought snacks and a better, more cinematic gunfight. Also, your CEO is a coward." He went into his little panic room. Cowards always hide. It's like a rule in the Screenwriting 101 handbook. Now let's stop this emo ninja from ruining my big dramatic entrance. Deadpool opened fire on Black Noir. The bullets, even Deadpool's specialized rounds, had no effect on the soup's durability, pinging off his chest like pebbles, but they served their purpose. They created a distraction. Noir momentarily shifted his focus to the nuisance in red. "He's the one who killed my friend's wife's family, Flaming Skull. He's a monster too. He's a Compound V product. Go for the CEO. I'll hold the big silent baby," Deadpool yelled, fully aware he was providing Black Noir with the opening to try and silence him permanently. Noir charged Deadpool, who simply let out a sarcastic sigh. "Fine. Death by Ninja totally saw that coming," he muttered, dropping his guns and drawing his katanas to try and parry the brutal, relentless punches of Vaught's enforcer. Deadpool's unkillable healing factor was tested to its absolute limit, as Noir's blows turned him into a smear of red and black cloth and regenerating flesh. But the mercenary kept talking, kept moving, and kept the unstoppable soup distracted. Meanwhile, Homelander, watching the security feeds from a private Vought jet that had been scrambled to the scene, was consumed by a blinding, jealous rage. He didn't care about Stan Edgar. He cared about the spirit of vengeance. He cared about the only thing in the world that didn't fear him. "He's getting the credit. He's the one fighting the hero, not me. I'm the hero." But before Homelander could arrive, another crisis was brewing in the skies. Soldier Boy. Stan Edgar, safe, inside his panic room, had contacted the Russian facility where Soldier Boy was being kept frozen, ordering Vought assets to expedite his transfer back to the US, a desperation move. The original plan was to use him against Homelander, but now the former leader of Payback was seen as the only supe powerful enough to fight the Ghost Rider's metaphysical power. The newly awakened Soldier Boy, driven mad by decades of torture and the sudden, chaotic nature of the modern world, was now free. He crash-landed onto Vought Tower, not knowing the Ghost Rider was inside. He simply saw the giant Vought symbol, the symbol of the company that betrayed him, and let out a massive omnidirectional energy blast, the blast that could remove a Supe's power, targeting the entire top floor. The blast hit the floor where the Ghost Rider and Black Noir were locked in combat, tearing through the reinforced steel and raining down fire and concrete onto the streets below. The explosion, brutal, immediate, and utterly indiscriminate, shattered the ongoing fight. The energy blast, designed to neutralize Compound V powers, struck both Noir and the Ghost Rider. For Black Noir, the effect was devastating. The Compound V in his body reacted violently to the energy, causing him to convulse and collapse, his already fragile mind reeling from the physical and energetic overload. For the Ghost Rider, the effect was negligible, but it was a massive physical threat to the surroundings. The spirit of vengeance was momentarily pushed back, but his hellfire was not extinguished. He recognized the raw, terrifying power of the blast. The spirit of vengeance looked at the incapacitated Noir, then at the hole in the ceiling where the figure of the archaic shield-carrying Supe was now descending. The Ghost Rider made a choice. The immediate danger, the brutal collateral damage of Soldier Boy, was a more pressing matter than the judgment of the CEO, who was currently safe behind a foot of steel. Butcher, watching the chaos from below, was apoplectic. "The old bastard's loose. He's going to level the city. We had Edgar. We had him. Now the Flaming Skull is going to go after the only one who can actually take down Homelander." Deadpool, having pulled himself from the wreckage with a new scar and a surprisingly intact sense of humor, saw the opportunity. New villain unlocked. Soldier Boy looks like Captain America, acts like a drunk uncle with an anger problem. Great. Homelander is busy, Noir is napping, and the CEO is playing peekaboo. We're back in the game, baby. The Ghost Rider, a beacon of otherworldly flame, roared to life. He remounted his hell cycle, which had miraculously survived the atomic blast. Vengeance would wait for Stan Edgar, the protection of the innocent, even those innocent of being Compound V subjects, would not. The spirit of vengeance was a chaotic force, but his moral compass was absolute. Soldier Boy's indiscriminate blast was a sin of mass destruction, a crime that demanded immediate retribution. The hell cycle launched itself up through the blast hole, the fire engine noise of the cycle, a terrifying contrast to the silent, cold rage of Soldier Boy. The ultimate clash was not between the modern god and the cosmic entity, but between the cosmic entity and the terrifying relic of toxic masculinity and unbridled, city-destroying power. The fight between the Ghost Rider and Soldier Boy was a brutal, non-stop display of raw power, moving from the shattered penthouse of Vought Tower to the chaotic skies above Manhattan. Soldier Boy, a man whose entire existence was predicated on a simplistic, destructive form of heroism, had no concept of a metaphysical opponent. He fought with primal, explosive force, his super strength and durability on full display, coupled with his terrifying localized energy blasts that threatened to vaporize anything nearby. The Ghost Rider met him with equal and often superior spiritual force. The Hell Cycle was more than a vehicle, it was an extension of the spirit, and it moved through the air like a demonic projectile, avoiding Soldier Boy's punches and blasts. When Soldier Boy grabbed the rider, the heat of the hellfire was immediate and agonizing, burning through the Supe's protective armor and forcing him to release his grip. Butcher, realizing that the immediate threat had shifted from corporate warfare to city-leveling collateral damage, quickly rallied his team. "Huey, Starlight, get on a goddamn roof. Frenchie, you got to use that sonic weapon now, not to douse the rider, but to keep the old bastard's blast contained. If he lets off one more full-power nuke, the city's gone." Starlight, having been given a clear mandate to protect civilians rather than fight Homelander's corporate interests, didn't hesitate. She flew into the fray, not to fight the Ghost Rider, but to use her light projection to create energy barriers and redirect the worst of Soldier Boy's chaotic energy blasts away from the densely populated areas below. Deadpool, meanwhile, was having the time of his life, utilizing the chaos to fulfill his secondary objective: pure, unadulterated corporate anarchy. He ran through the lower floors of Vault Tower, where a skeleton crew of executives and staff were hiding, planting small, cartoonishly large explosives on strategic servers and communication systems. "This is called the Corporate Efficiency Reduction Protocol," he explained to a frozen, whimpering Vought accountant, taping a grenade to a server rack. "If Vought can't transmit its lies, it can't operate. I'm saving the world, one disgruntled shareholder at a time. Also, you should never wear a tie that color. It clashes with the bloodstains." Back in the sky, the Ghost Rider was slowly gaining the upper hand. Soldier Boy's guilt was not as insidious or complex as Homelander's, but it was massive. The systemic abuse of his team, the casual murders, the betrayal of his country, the toxic masculinity that led to countless victims. The spirit of vengeance cornered him on the spire of the Chrysler Building, the air crackling with both the Ghost Rider's hellfire and Soldier Boy's volatile energy. "You are a false soldier!" the spirit boomed, his chains snapping out to bind Soldier Boy's shield to his arm. "Your honor is a lie, your service a crime." Soldier Boy, fueled by PTSD and rage, bellowed a denial. "I'm a hero. I'm the one who fought for my country. They betrayed me. They put me in a can." The Ghost Rider advanced, his skull tilting. He saw the genuine raw pain in Soldier Boy's soul, but it was eclipsed by decades of self-justified violence. The cosmic principle of vengeance was absolute, indifferent to personal tragedy. Just as the Ghost Rider raised his hand for the penance stare, a new problem arrived: Vaught's media counterstrike. Ashley Barrett, having managed to stabilize the Vault News network feed from a secure bunker, was running the worst of the super-terrorist campaign. Every channel cut to a single, heavily edited video montage of the Ghost Rider's fight with the Deep, focusing only on the Deep's agony and death, with the voice of Homelander providing a chilling, tearful commentary. "They are not heroes," Homelander's voice choked out, his performance flawless. "They are monsters. They destroyed an American icon and are now tearing apart our city, forcing a true patriot, Soldier Boy, to sacrifice himself to stop their reign of terror. They must be stopped." The public, having already been primed by decades of Vought PR, bought it immediately. The fear of an uncontrollable, non-Vought entity was greater than the skepticism of their favorite soup. Within minutes, the tide of popular opinion had turned. Butcher and Starlight's efforts to minimize collateral damage were interpreted as an alliance with the demon terrorists. On the ground, ordinary civilians began to turn against the Ghost Rider, screaming epithets, not at Soldier Boy, who had caused the massive property damage, but at the flaming skull who had brought the fear of judgment. Deadpool watched the public reaction from a hijacked Vought media van, leaning against a large speaker broadcasting Homelander's crocodile tears. "See, I told you, writers. The system always wins. The public is addicted to the lies. You can literally show them a demon and a genuine psychopath, and they'll still root for the one with the better PR team. It's the whole point of this show, right? Corporate cynicism as far as the eye can see." This public shift, was the ultimate moral attack on the Ghost Rider. His mission was vengeance against the guilty, but now he was being painted as the ultimate perpetrator of chaos, causing widespread public terror. The collateral damage that Butcher had warned about was not physical, it was moral. At that moment, Stan Edgar, who had emerged from his panic room, made a strategic decision. He instructed a Vault scientist to leak the information they had gathered on the Ghost Rider's limited vulnerabilities to the CIA, specifically to Grace Mallory. Edgar was playing a brilliant cold game of corporate chess. By giving the CIA an edge against the Ghost Rider, he would turn a corporate problem into a national security threat, forcing the government to use its resources to neutralize the spirit of vengeance, thereby protecting Vault's core assets, Homelander, and the compound VIP from the ultimate form of cosmic accountability. The Ghost Rider, faced with a city screaming his condemnation, hesitated. His mission was vengeance, not terror. The guilt of the public, their complicity, was a vast, overwhelming wave. In that moment of absolute cosmic distraction, Soldier Boy saw his chance. He released a full-power, wide-spectrum energy blast, aiming to incinerate the spirit of vengeance once and for all. The energy blast from Soldier Boy was not just a heat wave, it was a compound V-neutralizing atomic burst, and it was aimed at the heart of the spirit of vengeance. Frenchie, positioned on a nearby rooftop with reacted instantly. He triggered his experimental high-frequency sonic jammer, focusing the pulse to create a narrow containment field around Soldier Boy's immediate position. The jammer didn't stop the blast, but it narrowed its destructive radius, containing the most cataclysmic part of the explosion to the already devastated spire of the Chrysler Building. The Ghost Rider was still hit by the powerful energy, sending him reeling through the air. The flames on his skull flickered dangerously close to extinction, the Soldier Boy blast momentarily overriding the Rider's connection to the spirit of vengeance. It was a physical blow to a spiritual being. "He's vulnerable," yelled into his comms. "He's not immortal, he's just hard to kill. Billy, we need to move." Butcher, focused on the ultimate prize, the chaotic absence of Homelander, ignored the immediate danger. "No, let them fight. The old bastard will keep the flaming nutcase busy. We're going to use the distraction. Huey, get your ass ready. We're finding Edgar's safe room." The Ghost Rider recovered quickly, his hellfire reigniting with an intense, raging fury. He realized two things simultaneously: that Soldier Boy's power was too chaotic and destructive to be dealt with in a populated area, and that Homelander, the true source of Vault's infection, was still free and actively manipulating the global narrative. He made a strategic, moral retreat. The spirit of vengeance was about justice, not the unnecessary destruction of innocence. He pulled back, his hell cycle turning into a terrifying blur of fire, heading in the opposite direction from the raging Soldier Boy, who now saw the fleeing figure as an admission of defeat and let out a triumphant, barbaric roar. The retreat, however, was immediately seized upon by the true enemy. Homelander, having watched the entire sequence from his Vault jet, saw his moment. The ultimate symbol of Vault's manufactured heroism flew at impossible speed, cutting off the Ghost Rider over the skies of a densely packed residential area. Homelander was no longer driven by ego, he was driven by existential fear. He had to kill the spirit of vengeance to prove to himself and to the world that he was the only god. "You don't get to walk away," Homelander screamed, his eyes red and pulsing with power. "You don't get to judge me. I am the boy's universe. I am the only thing that matters." He hit the Ghost Rider with the full, unbridled force of his super strength. It wasn't a tactical strike, it was a desperate, unhinged tackle that drove both of them plummeting toward the ground, tearing through the reinforced concrete of a mid-rise condo building. The impact was cataclysmic, a massive, localized earthquake of shattered concrete, pulverized bone, and blinding fire. Homelander immediately unleashed a continuous, sustained barrage of heat vision, not at the Ghost Rider, but at the structure around them, trying to bury the spirit under tons of rubble and create an environment where the Hellfire couldn't breathe. The Ghost Rider was pinned, surrounded by the physical detritus of Homelander's casual destruction. He knew he was running out of time. His Hellfire was contained by the rubble, and Homelander was hovering just above the wreckage, his face a mask of terrifying, victorious madness. "Die, you freak!" Homelander roared. "Nobody is stronger than me. Nobody is cleaner. I am perfect." With a final, massive effort, the spirit of vengeance pushed free, his skeletal hand shooting out and grabbing Homelander's ankle. The Hellfire immediately began to spread, consuming the Soup's boot and uniform, seeking out the guilt within the godlike being. Homelander shrieked, a sound of pure terror, as the energy passed through his invulnerable skin, a foreign, terrifying sensation. The Ghost Rider held on, fighting against Homelander's brutal kicks, and locked his blazing, spectral eyes onto the frantic, panicked gaze of the world's greatest superhero. The penance stare was unleashed. For Homelander, the stare was an eternity of self-recognition. He didn't just see the faces of the people he had killed, Madeline Stillwell, the countless civilians, the Soup terrorists he created to save the day. He saw the true, pathetic nature of his inner self. He saw the needy, frightened child in the Vought lab, desperate for a loving touch. He saw the lie of his own heroism, the depth of his psychopathy, the terrifying emptiness of his soul. Homelander's compound. V-enhanced durability, his absolute physical supremacy, was his worst enemy. It meant he couldn't die from the physical shock of the stare. He had to withstand the full, agonizing spiritual onslaught. He didn't scream, he simply broke. He released a high-pitched, sobbing cry, his heat vision flickered off, and his entire body went limp in the spirit's grasp. A trickle of blood, the first that anyone had ever seen, leaked from his nose and ears. The man who had been the most powerful being on the planet, the one who lived entirely on the lie of his own superiority, had been forced to face the unmitigated, absolute horror of his own moral reality. His mind, already a tinderbox of psychosis, shattered under the pressure. The Ghost Rider, satisfied with the judgment, released the broken Soup. Homelander, catatonic, his eyes vacant and wide, simply floated in the air, 1,000 feet above the wrecked condo, the red and blue costumes smeared with dirt, and his own moral filth. He was neutralized, not dead, but broken, a living, breathing symbol of shattered supremacy. Deadpool, having made his way to the wreckage, surveyed the scene and nodded approvingly. Now that's a finale, narrator. The villain is destroyed, the hero wins, and the audience gets to debate if he's technically dead. High five, Ghost Rider. Butcher and his team, having witnessed the impossible on their surveillance feeds, were stunned into silence. Their ultimate enemy was gone, neutralized not by a bullet or a bomb, but by the weight of his own guilt. The victory was absolute, terrifying, and utterly final in its moral implication. The true evil of Vaught's system, the unaccountability, had been answered by the ultimate accountability. The immediate aftermath was chaotic, but the silence was the most deafening factor. Homelander, the unkillable corporate god, drifted catatonically above the wreckage, a horrifying, inert testament to the power of pure moral reckoning. Vought International was thrown into utter disarray. The symbol of their entire operation, the cornerstone of their brand, their stock price, and their political influence, was now a shattered, drooling husk. The corporate machine, however, was trained to adapt, to spin, and to survive. Ashley Barrett, despite her inner turmoil, quickly issued an emergency press release. The narrative had to shift instantly. Homelander has suffered a massive, debilitating psychic attack from the super-terrorist entities, sacrificing his mind to protect America from their ungodly powers. He is a martyr, the true hero who took the full force of the metaphysical attack. Homelander's broken state was spun as the ultimate act of heroism and self-sacrifice. But the fear of the Ghost Rider, the spirit who could kill a supe with a look, was now permanent. Every supe in Vought, from A-Train to the lowest-tier corporate hero, now had a new, terrifying constraint, the threat of absolute moral judgment. They could deal with a bomb or a laser, but they could not deal with their own guilt. The Ghost Rider had introduced a moral vulnerability into the entire Compound Vi ecosystem. The boys, observing the paralyzed state of the corporation, knew their window of opportunity was now. Butcher, still reeling from the shock of the clean kill, contacted Deadpool. "You did it, you mad bastard!" Butcher's voice was heavy with awe and grudging respect. "You broke the invincible prick. Now what's next? Vaught's still standing, the system's still there." "Oh, it's never about the individual, Billy," Deadpool replied cheerfully, having looted a nearby luxury car and loaded it with more chimichangas. "It's always about the system. The flaming guy here did the hard part. He put the fear of God, or, the fear of hell, into the corporate structure. That's enough to get the ball rolling." The Ghost Rider, having completed his immediate vengeance, was now focused on the escape. He had brought the system to a standstill, but he was not an agent of sustained anarchy. He was an agent of divine, temporary judgment. The spirit of vengeance could not remain in a realm where the laws of cosmic justice were so actively and systematically perverted. "The job is done," the Ghost Rider's voice boomed, though this time only Deadpool and Butcher could hear it on their comms. "The greatest sin has been judged. The portal will open soon. You have been given your opportunity." Deadpool winked at his non-existent camera. "See, he's a professional. Clean in, clean out. But before we go, I left a little parting gift." Butcher watched in disbelief as the now activated explosives Deadpool had planted across Vought Tower detonated in a series of perfectly timed bursts. They weren't powerful enough to topple the building, but they were surgically placed to destroy key data centers, legal archives, and communication hubs. Corporate anarchy delivered with panache. The chaos that followed was unprecedented. With Homelander catatonic and Vaught's internal systems crippled, the fear of the Ghost Rider was amplified by the immediate loss of control. Stan Edgar, watching his empire descend into internal chaos, knew the final outcome was not certain, but the cost was now existential. The dimensional tier opened again, not high in the sky, but in the center of the demolished condo building, a swirling vortex of green and violet energy. "Time to go, flaming pal. The audience needs another episode," Deadpool announced, climbing on to the back of the Hell Cycle. He paused, looking directly into the camera that Butcher had mounted on his dashboard. "Hey, Huey! Don't let Butcher convince you to take more of that temp feed junk. It'll kill you. And Huey, Starlight's a keeper. Seriously, the whole moral core thing is hot right now. Okay, bye." The Ghost Rider roared the Hell Cycle into the dimensional tear, disappearing in a flash of hellfire and ozone, leaving behind a terrified city and a broken system. Butcher watched the dimensional tear close, a mixture of awe, satisfaction, and deep-seated cynicism on his face. He picked up his radio. "All right, you wankers. We got the bastard's brain in a jar. Now we got a city full of terrified supes. The system's on fire. It's time to work. We got a war to win." The impact of the two chaotic figures was a seismic, permanent shift. Homelander was neutralized, replaced by a fearful, broken mess. The Supies knew they were no longer invulnerable to accountability. Vought was wounded, its legal and PR machine crippled by the systemic sabotage. The system hadn't been destroyed, but it had been given a moral flaw that could never be patched. The boys had been given the ultimate weapon, not a bomb, but fear of consequence. They would have to navigate a new world where Homelander was a symbol of martyrdom and the Ghost Rider was a myth of terrible justice, and where the fight against the system had just become 10 times more brutal, complicated, and desperately needed. Butcher looked up at the broken, hovering figure of Homelander, then at the fire spreading through the corporate spire, and knew that the clean kill had only just begun the truly dirty work. The Ghost Rider and Deadpool were gone, swallowed by a dimensional fold that appeared over the ruins of a downtown condo, but the psychic scar they left on the boys' universe was indelible. Homelander, the great symbol of Vought's power, remained floating, a catatonic monument to the absolute reality of guilt. Ashley Barrett's desperate PR campaign had successfully spun the broken god as a martyr, a victim of super-terrorism, thus preserving Vaught's brand but failing to preserve its control. The terrifying moral vulnerability introduced by the penance stare now hung over every compound V soup, a cold, constant threat that no amount of corporate lawyers or invulnerable skin could ever truly defend against. Butcher and his team, energized by the unexpected, brutal victory, now faced a new, more chaotic war. Homelander was neutralized, but Vought was now more dangerous than ever, cornered and fighting for its life against a public slowly being divided by the Ghost Rider's clear-cut justice and Homelander's tragic PR spin. The corporation was already developing a new anti-metaphysical defense, preparing to counter the moral accountability that had briefly reigned. As the sun rose over the smoldering wreckage of Vout Tower, the boys began their true fight, knowing their enemy was wounded, but realizing that in this world, even a shattered god could be a more powerful symbol than a righteous demon. Some things can't be fixed. More stories await.